Hello again. Welcome to Suburban Appalachia channel. Appreciate you joining us for this video. And today we're going to be canning tomatoes. As you can see, I've been in the garden. I've got green tomatoes all over me. It's hot, but this is a fun way of keeping a taste of summer for this winter. It's very easy to do. We've got some larger tomatoes here, and we've got some back here that we're going to make juice out of. Very easy to do. I'll be back and forth to the stove in here, but the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove these peels off the ones we're canning. And the easiest way to do that is to blanch them in boiling water for about 60 seconds, and then put them in an ice water bath, and the peel will come right off. And I'm not going to do but a couple to demonstrate how it works, and then I'll go ahead and do them all. And then we'll start putting them in the jar, and I'll show you how to put these things together. It's a beautiful way of preserving tomatoes for the winter months. Okay, we've got our tomatoes all peeled and got the top core cut out, and this is very simple. We have our sterilized jar. We'll just start dropping them in. I use a funnel to keep from making such a mess. I don't pack these in. I just let them fall in very loosely. As you can see, I don't know, I've got so much on my table you may not can see. But I'm dropping these in at random here. And these are a pasty type tomato, these Romas are. And so when we process them, we'll process them for like 10 minutes. And they'll be delicious. Now, I don't want to get too many in there. Don't want to pack them in tight. So the next step in the process is it's very easy. I'll take a teaspoon measuring spoon, and I'll get a teaspoon of kosher salt, pour it over the top. Then I'll get a teaspoon of castor sugar, regular sugar, pour it over the top like so. And then I've got some water here, and this is the liquid, and I'll pour this over the tomatoes, and I'll pour it till it gets about a ½ inch from the top, something about like so. You can see. Then I'll wipe the lid off. This is very, very important. You can dampen a clean towel with some white vinegar, or wet it and go around the top. You want to be sure that's good and clean. And I have a hot can lid that's been sterilized, and you need to sterilize these when you do your jars. And when you put the lid on, if you don't feel it's kind of stick, if it's not sticky, you need to put it back in the hot water bath. Then you take a can ring, like so, and tighten it up, get it good and snug. And as you can see, they're beautiful in the jar. And what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and fill up our jars. And then when we get this, we'll process everything at the end, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, we got our canned tomatoes in the jar, and they look beautiful. And we're going to wait till the end when we make our juice to process all of them in the boiling water bath. But what I have here is all those larger tomatoes that you saw sitting here in the kitchen. I've blanched them, removed the skin, and chopped them up in quarters. Some people don't remove their skins, but I think it makes it easier to run through the sieve to make the juice. But what we're going to do, we're going to put these in a pot and cook them till they soften up and kind of macerate. I may even use my hand blender or potato masher to mash them up, and I want to get all the juice that I can out of these. But you usually put plain tomatoes in there, and if it's a little dry to start with, you can add a few cups of water. But I'm going to try these without water and try to get the concentrated juice. But we're going to put these in the pot over here on the stove and cook them till they soften and get mushy, and then we'll take them and sieve them and put the juice in the jar, and I'll show you how we season the juice. We don't use lemon juice. Some people put a teaspoon of lemon juice in a jar. We just use a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of sugar. I think lemon juice adds a taste sometimes. I like lemons in lemonade. I like lemon desserts, but in my fruit and other foods, tomatoes, I don't really want to taste lemon. And if you use the salt and you process them the right way, they'll turn out just fine. And that's here where we live. But I'm gonna get these to cooking, and when we come back, we'll be ready to run it through a sieve. I wanted to show you what's going on over here in the pot before we start sieving these. The tomatoes are not quite done yet, but I am taking and skimming off the foam as they cook, and you can see they're softening up, and it smells so good. Looks already making me hungry. They smell so delicious. There's nothing like fresh tomatoes. But I'm gonna let these cook to where when I take one of them and press up against the side, they break apart. And it's almost there. They've been cooking probably about 15 or 20 minutes, and it varies on how ripe your fruit is and where you live and what kind of tomato you're using. But these are juicing up very well. I've added no water. Everything that you see in the pot is actually from the tomato itself, and that's good. That's what I want. But I'm going to keep skimming these off. As you can see, there's some foam I've done removed, but we're going to let this cook for a while longer, and it won't be long. We'll run them through the sieve. Okay, we've got our tomatoes cooked, and as you can see, they're just falling apart, and all this is natural juice. We didn't add any water to it, and they're falling apart, and that's what we was looking for. But what I have here is a rotary sieve that I washed. It was stored from last year, and I've got a pan here, a clean pan. So what we'll do, we'll take the liquid and the tomatoes and put them in here, and we'll run it through this sieve. And I'll show you after I get some in here what you do. I'm going to get several ladlefuls. And then you take the sieve and you turn it. And it takes the pulp that's there, it's in the tomato that's been cooked down. And you just keep running them through. And eventually, the screen in the bottom of this, it has a screen in the bottom, it'll get clogged. And then I'll have to stop, and I've got me a waste pan here in the floor that I'll take these, the cores and seeds and whatever's left, and we'll put that in the compost. But we'll just keep sieving this. It takes a little practice. Now you can do this with a regular sieve and force it through with a spatula. This rotary sieve makes it a little bit easier to do, and I like to use a big pan when I'm making juice. I like to use a bigger pan, so I'm kind of messy, and this is a little neater way of doing it. And this is hot, and you need to be careful. You can wait till it cools off if you would like. It makes no difference because we're going to process them. We're going to process these when we get them in the can. But it doesn't take long to get a lot of juice out of just a few tomatoes. And this will be so delicious this summer or this winter. Like I say, it's a taste of summer. When the snow's flying, we have some bad winters here sometimes. Now some people don't peel their tomato before they do this. I like to. It just makes it easier. The skins will clog the sieve up quicker than the seeds and the cores will. But overall, this makes it a lot easier to handle. Makes it a lot easier to do. You can do it with like I say, with a spatula, forcing it through like a colander or a fine sieve. But this does a good job. But we're going to keep on sieving these tomatoes, and when we get done sieving, we'll get ready to put them in the jar. We have the tomatoes run through a sieve, and you can see it's quite a bit of juice out of those tomatoes. You saw what I had stacked up. But I want to show you what we do to complete our canning process here for tomato juice. We'll take and fill these jars, and I probably could get a bigger dipper. This is one I keep in my canning kitchen, and works well for other things. But we'll fill this jar with this delicious homemade tomato juice. And I'll show you how we're going to season it, what we're going to do to it to help preserve it and give it a nice flavor. I've already tasted it. It tastes delicious, and there's no salt in it at all up to this point. But we'll fill it about a 1/2 inch from the top. We'll fill it about a 1/2 inch from the top, and this is a messy job, and that's why I like doing it in the canning kitchen. But what you do, just like we did with the tomatoes that's sitting here behind us, you take 1 teaspoon of salt, just like so, drop it in the jar. You take 1 teaspoon of castor sugar, or regular sugar in America. I know over in Europe, I kind of got a habit of calling it castor sugar. So we'll put 1 teaspoon of sugar, and that's it. And it's delicious. You don't need any lemon juice or anything like that because the tomato's already acidic enough. And we're going to process these in boiling water for about 10 minutes when we finish. Wipe off the top of your lid. Again, I can't stress that enough. Wipe off the top of your lid. I have sterilized lids. We'll go ahead and put the lid on and screw on a can ring. And that salt and sugar, when we process it, will go through the jar and it'll be delicious. And if you choose, there's still a few seed in here that went through the sieve. You can run it through a cheesecloth. But I like a little body to mine, and it's old-timey and it's delicious. But we're going to go ahead and finish these jars off, and I'm going to process them. I'm going to process the juice and the tomatoes for 10 minutes in boiling water, and that should seal them off. And when we get that finished, I'll show you what they look like in the jar, and we'll be ready after they're sealed to put them in here in our basement. We have a can shelf in the back, and they'll be there when we get ready for them this winter. Well, we've got them processed, and as you can see, it's beautiful in the jar, and I'm using a towel because they're still hot. But we made 5 quarts of tomato juice, and we made 4 quarts of canned tomatoes. They look beautiful. And this is a video to show you how easy you can do this and enjoy the fruits of your garden. And God's been good to us, and now we can put this up for the winter months. Hope you've enjoyed this recipe. The key points to remember on this is these are quart jars, and depending on which country you're in, but I use a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of sugar per jar, per quart jar. No added water other than what we poured over our canned tomatoes. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. I appreciate you all watching. There's been several watching in other countries, and we appreciate it. And if you like our channel, subscribe to it. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again real soon for another Suburban Appalachia recipe and maybe some crafts coming up. So we thank you for your time out of your day to watch us, and hope to see you again very soon.